Friends and viewer, Casablanca, it is though a novel, but it remained. The film was adopted from this novel, the name of which is Casablanca, and it remained the beautiful story and written by Michael Curtiz. So from this novel, a film was adopted, was made by Hollywood. The film, so the story of Casablanca starts within a spinning image of a globe and the sounds of La Marseillaise, the French national anthem. A voice explained the significance of the city of Casablanca in French-ruled Morocco during World War II. Many people wanted to escape Europe from America, and Lisbon, Portugal became the most popular port of exit in the Second World War. Getting to Lisbon was not easy. A tortuous refugee path brought people to Casablanca, where they would search for an exit visa for Portugal. As the narrator finished the description, the camera shows Casablanca's bustling market. Over the radio, the French police announced that the two German officers were murdered on a train and that the murderer is headed for Casablanca. Shortly thereafter, an important German officer, Major Strasser, arrived at the Casablanca airport and is greeted by a local French commander, Captain Louis Renault. Strasser asks about the couriers, and Louis says that the murderer, like everyone else, will be at Rick that evening. The scene shifts to Rick Cafe American, a stylish nightclub and casino. Ugarte approaches Rick, the bar's owner, and asks if he will hold some letters of transit for him. Rick observed dryly that a murdered German courier were carrying letters of transit, but accepts the letter and hides them in the piano played by his house musician Sam. Signor Ferrari, owner of the rival bar, the Blue Parrot, offered to buy Rick's, but Rick says his bar isn't for sale. Yovne, Rick's neglected lover, tries to arrange a date for that evening, but Rick dismisses her attempts to pin him down and calls a cab to send her home. Louis tells Rick he's going to make an arrest and warns Rick against protecting the courier killer. I stick my neck out for nobody, Rick responds. Louis also mentioned Victor Lazalo, a famous Czech nationalist, will be arriving in Casablanca and warns Rick against trying to assist Lazlo, whose political activity are a threat to Nazi Germany. In the conversation that ensues, we learn that Rick was involved in anti-fascist wars in 1930s, supporting the Republican in the Spanish Civil War and the Ethiopian against Italy. Strasser's arrival cuts the conversation short. With this German officer present, Louis decides the time has come to arrest the murderer of the German courier. Cornered, Ugarte appealed to Rick for help, but Rick does nothing. After things calm down, Lazlo enters the bar with Ilsa. They have come in search of exit visas. Strasser approaches Lazlo with hostility, and Louis politely requests that Lazlo report to his office the next day. Meanwhile, Ilsa and Sam who recognized each other, began to talk. At first, Sam refuses Ilsa's request that he plays as time goes by, but eventually he relents. The music brings Rick to the piano. "I thought I told you never to play," he begins, breaking off when he sees Ilsa, Laszlo, and Louis join the group and Rick sit down for a drink. Violating his rule of never drinking with customer when the couple leaves, Rick picks up the check, breaking another personal rule. Later that evening, Rick drinks alone after bar cross. Sam plays as time goes by again and Rick thinks about the past. In a flashback, we see a happier, less haggard Rick in Paris with Ilsa by his side. They drive through the city, ride a boat down the Seine, pop open a bottle of champagne and dance at a club. Although they were clearly in love, they avoid all questions about each other's past. When they hear word that the German army is approaching Paris, Rick knows he will have to leave the city. Rick proposed to Ilsa, who tries her best to hide her anguish, saying she wasn't planned that far in advance. Rick wasn't worried. However, he thinks they'll leave together the next day for Marseille. At the train station the next day, Rick waits in the pouring rain, but Ilsa is nowhere to be found. Sam arrives and shows Rick a note. The note is from Ilsa and says that she can never see him again. At this point, the flashback ends and the scene shifts back to Casablanca from Paris. Ilsa enters the bar. She wants to explain what happened in Paris, but Rick is drunk and angry and Ilsa leaves. The next day, Ilsa and Laszlo goes to Louis' office, where Strasser tells Laszlo he will never escape Casablanca alive. The couple then goes to Blue Parrot to visit Signor Ferrari and arrive just as Rick is leaving. As Laszlo talks with Ferrari, Ilsa tells Rick that Laszlo is her husband and has been for years, even when she and Rick were together in Paris. Ferrari says he can obtain a visit for Ilsa, but not for Laszlo. The couple decide not to split up. Ferrari suggests they speak to Rick, whom he suggests is holding or gets stolen letters of transit. That evening at Rick's young Bulgarian woman, Mrs. Brandel, approached Rick to ask if Louis is trustworthy. Louis, as Rick knows, has a habit of offering female refugee exile visa in exchange for sex. Rick says Louis' word is good, but not wanting to let Mrs. Brandel's new marriage be harmed. He arranged for her husband to win big at the roulette table so that he can buy a visa on their own. Later, Laszlo asked to speak to Rick. He offered to buy the letter to transit, but Rick says he'll never sell them. When Laszlo asks why, Rick replies, "Ask your wife." German soldiers have gathered around Sam's piano and are singing the German national anthem. Laszlo tells the band to play La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, and leads the patrons of the bar in a stirring rendition of song which drowns out the German. Strasser is furious and demands that Louis shut down Rick's. Louis closes Rick's on the pretext that gambling takes place there, even as he accepts his evening's winning. Back at the hotel, Laszlo asks Ilsa if there is anything she wants to tell him about Paris, and she replies no. Husband and wife reaffirm their love for each other. As Victor leaves for a meeting of the underground resistance, Elsa leave too and surprise Rick by showing up in his apartment. She pleads with him for the letters of transit, urging him to put aside his personal feeling for something more important. When Rick still refuses, she pulls a gun on him. Rick dares her to shoot, but Elsa cannot. Instead, she breaks down in tears and claims she still loves Rick. They embrace each other. Later, Elsa explained that what happened in Paris after she married Laszlo. He had to return to Prague, where he was arrested and put in concentration camp. Months later, she heard he was killed in an escape attempt. She met Rick shortly thereafter. Elsa learned Laszlo was still alive just when she and Rick were about to leave Paris together. Laszlo needed her and she decided to stay with him. She didn't tell Rick because she knew he wouldn't leave Paris if he found out. And then Gestapo would arrest him. Her story finished. Elsa says she'll never be able to leave Rick a second time. But she begs that he help Laszlo escape. As for whether she will go with Laszlo or stay with Rick, she says she doesn't know what's right anymore and tells Rick, you have to think for both of us. Later that evening, Laszlo claimed to know that Rick loves Elsa and asked for the letter of transit for her sake. Just then the German soldier burst into Rick's and arrest Laszlo. The next day, Rick pleads with Louis to release Laszlo, saying that Laszlo can be arrested on a more serious charge, possession of stolen letters of transit. Rick also tells Louis that he helps to use the letter to escape with Elsa. That afternoon, Rick sells his club to Ferrari. That evening, back at Rick's, as he hands the letter to Laszlo, Louis emerged from the shadow to make the arrest. Just as suddenly, Rick pulls out a gun and points it at Louis. He ordered Louis to call the airport to make sure that evening flight to Lisbon will take off as planned. Louis pretends to call the airport but actually calls Strasser. At the airport, Rick makes Louis fill in the letters of transit to Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo. Elsa objects, but Rick says he did the thinking for both of them and decided that for Laszlo to continue doing his work, he needs Elsa by his side. Rick tells Laszlo that Elsa visited him last night and pretended to still love him to get the letter. He knows she was lying, Rick says, because it was over a long time. As Rick is talking, Elsa sobs in the background. After goodbyes, Laszlo boards the plane and then Strauss arrives. He calls the radio tower to prevent the plane taking off, but Rick shoots him and plane leaves. The French police arrive and Louis, who was saying everything, order round up the usual suspect. As the crop drove off, Louis congratulates Rick on becoming a patriot, then becomes a patriot himself, symbolized by his throwing out a bottle of Vichy water produced in the unoccupied region of France that persecuted Jews and tried to win Nazi favor. Rick and Louis walk along the runway together. Louis says he can arrange for Rick to escape to Brazzaville, another French colony in Africa, and then announce he will go too. The movie ends with Rick saying the famous final line, Louis, I think this is the beginning of beautiful friendship. La Marseillaise plays in the background. So, ladies and gentlemen, Casablanca, a beautiful movie and a beautiful novel. the memory of which remains forever in our mind. I hope you will enjoy this book. Thank you.